Sup, freaks? This is your boy Marty Bent here to introduce this episode of Tales from the Crypt. I was joined by our boy Matt Odell. We sat down with Will Cole from Unchained Capital to talk about his journey to Unchained, the products that they're working on at Unchained, why they build the products the way they do, how they're going to try to bring products that are true to Bitcoin's ethos to the market. We also talked about a bunch of the stuff that Will did in Wyoming to help get some laws passed there and create a Bitcoin safe haven within the United States. I'm not going to mention any more. You guys are going to listen to the episode so you'll find out what we talked about. But huge fan of Will, great Bitcoiner, doing incredible work. I think you guys are really going to like this episode. This episode is brought to you by our good friends at Unchained Capital. Disclaimer, Unchained is a sponsor. Will works for Unchained. So just know that going into this, Unchained Capital is helping Bitcoiners by creating financial services for Bitcoiners with a security-first mindset. Security-first mindset, what's that mean? Well, they have products, mainly their Vault product, which allows you to engage in a multi-sig quorum with Unchained, which you hold 2 of 3 keys on a ledger or Trezor, and soon to be a cold card. Soon TM, it's coming. You'll hear it in the episode. You hold 2 of 3 keys. Unchained has the 3rd key. If you ever want to move your Bitcoin out of the vault, out of the multi-sig vault, you can do that by yourself. If you're ever in a pinch, you only have 1 key on you, and you need to move your Bitcoin, Unchained is there to be that second signature in that 2 of 3 quorum. On top of that, they have Bitcoin collateralized loans. If you don't want to sell your Bitcoin and you need some US dollar liquidity, you can take out a loan using Bitcoin as collateral. You put some Bitcoin up as collateral, you get same day US dollar liquidity. On top of that, they're working on incredible open source projects, including Caravan, which we talk about in this episode. Caravan is an open source desktop app that allows you to create the multi-sig quorums used in their Vault program. So if you don't want Unchained involved at all, you just want to create a multi-sig in an easy way, they have Caravan that allows you to do that. Very easy. Matt Odell has set up multi-sigs while drunk with American HODL and keep it simple Bitcoin. On top of that, we're going to Slip 39 and Hermit. We dive into Hermit in this episode too because it's really cool. Or did we miss it? That might have been the post-episode talk. We'll find out. And then they have their blog series, Gradually Then Suddenly with Parker Lewis. Will's writing good content. Drew's talking about HODL ways, Bitcoin in space. Joe Kelly's adding to the mix as well as Phil Geiger. Go to www.unchained-capital.com and check all this out. That's www.unchained-capital.com. Check out everything they got going on. On top of this episode is also brought to you by our good friends at the Cash App. All right, they're helping you do many things. We're going to start with the sats. All right, you can stack sats, send sats, receive sats, sell sats if you so please. On top of that, you can make sats a standard within the app so you don't have any unit bias problems and Bitcoin doesn't seem as expensive. You're stacking sats, not Bitcoin. Well, you're doing both, but it depends on how you want to look at it. On top of that, they're allowing you to DCA in the stats. What's in the sats, not stats? They keep your stats though, so you can see when you're buying and how much and at what price. But you can dollar cost average into sats. You can set it and forget it. If you want to buy at a certain cadence with a certain amount, you can now do that within the app. On top of the sats, they're letting you stack slivers of stonks. You freaks already know all about it. All right, you don't have to. I just have to let you know it's there. The optionality exists. If your favorite stonk's a little too expensive and you want to invest in that stonk, stack a sliver of that stock, you can buy as little as $1 with Cash App investing. Because the Cash App is directly connected to your bank account, or it may be your bank account, they now have accounting numbers and routing numbers. You can directly deposit your bank checks. No, your work checks, your income into the Cash App now. So you can do it all in one spot. It could be a neobank. Because it is a neobank that you're using as your bank account, or because it's directly connected to another bank account that you have, there's no 4 to 5 day waiting period. Start stacking sats and slivers of stonks today. Cash App Investing is a subsidiary of Square and member SIPC. As always, make sure you use the code STACKINGSATS. It's STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $10. And $10 is going to go to Owls the Cross. When you download the app, use the code STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $10 that you can then use to stack sats. And our good friends at Owls the Cross in Chicago, they're doing incredible things. They're going to get $10. Not to be confused with that dirtbag Al. He won't go away. He's harassing the podcast. I might have to get like a podcast restraining order on this dirtbag Al. We may set a precedent in law with a podcast restraining order on this dirtbag Al. We're going to look into it, freaks. Use the code Stacking Sats and Al's Lacrosse, not that dirtbag Al. Down the Cash App and enjoy this episode of Will Call. Credible conversation.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. It's beautiful where I am. I'm excited to take a walk outside after this recording. But before that walk, we have a lot to talk about. Matt O'Dells is with us today.
Sup, freaks?
And we're both sitting down with one of the last Bitcoiners we met in person before this whole quarantine and lockdown madness started a few months ago. We're sitting down with the Chief Product Officer of Unchained Capital, our good friends at Unchained Capital. Will Cole, how are you doing?
Howdy, Marty. Howdy, Matt. Good to see y'all.
Good to see you too. It's a long time coming. For you freaks that don't know, I've known Will on the internet for quite some time now. We've been talking in back channels for a while. One of my favorite Bitcoiners who's been doing a lot of important work. Most recently moved to Unchained Capital to work on their product team from Stack Overflow. Huge pickup for the Unchained team. I'm not going to explain all you've done for Bitcoin. I'll let you do, or all that you do in Bitcoin. You've done a lot of work in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Before we jump into everything, though, Will, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to Bitcoin, and what you're doing at Unchained?
Okay, I'm gonna do that, but before, this is really fun. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and we've talked about it. And you guys are awesome. I think I met you before you started the podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so as well.
I think we were talking like maybe briefly before, but it was before for sure.
Yeah.
And look what you've done. This is incredible. Or both of you. I mean, like.
Well, the feeling is mutual. Look what you've done and what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me on. This is going to be fun. So my background, as you mentioned, been hanging around the Bitcoin world for a while now. Recently started at Unchained Capital last December. And really, I mean, yeah, my background starts, 2011, 2012 time of getting into Bitcoin, living in New York City in the wake of QE and the financial crisis and all the things going on. I think my memory could be a little bit shot here, but I remember, I took a strong interest in gold around that time. And I hadn't heard about Bitcoin yet in, 2009, 2010. And I was just starting my gold journey when I found out about Bitcoin, Peter Schiff and Rickards and all that type of stuff. And it sucks that they hate Bitcoin because I was really liking their stuff at that time. And it was sort of well primed. Just living in New York, I was working at Thomson Reuters at the time, making financial products for investment banks and things like that. And watching half of our clients just disappear, in 5 months, and all the havoc that was going on there. I would say that I was looking and primed to find something that was not the legacy system. But really, it was my brother Napoleon. He got into it. I was complaining. He was the one doing all the sleuthing online, and he introduced me to the idea in 2011. Like everyone that I think you've ever had on the podcast, didn't do enough about it at the time, but decided that stop doing my own startups, go join another startup, make some money, buy some Bitcoin. joined Stack Overflow and actually fell in love with the product and what I was doing there, and stayed there for a while until Unchained came calling.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your experience at Stack Overflow, because I think that's why I was so excited when you came to Unchained Capital, because Stack Overflow is a product. It's a great product, especially a developer, and it's a developer-focused product, and Bitcoin's heavily depends on developers making sure that it is secure and it has a good community. That's one thing with Stack Overflow. It sort of facilitates a community of developers. Is that correct assumption?
Yeah, I think it facilitates thousands of communities of developers. I think that's one of the dangerous misconceptions of Stack Overflow. And I don't speak for the company anymore. I don't work there, but I did for 8 years, and it's challenging with that many people, right? It is community focused, like a Wikipedia, like Reddit, and things like that. And I really liked the sort of origin story at Stack Overflow, which was, Stack didn't, it wasn't the, all the stuff that's going on with Twitter, with free speech and everything. We never had that problem. From the very beginning, it was, this is not a place for free speech. We are creating an artifact that is a question and an answer pair. If you want to talk about things that aren't in the format of a question and answer pair, you can go anywhere else on the internet to do so. We were like heavily moderated. We're famous for moderation. It was that we are solving a problem of, it's really hard to find high quality, high signal information on specific problems for programmers. I mean, you go to Barnes and Nobles and find a book and then like shift through it and it's like, oh, but that's an old version of this. You go look on, different coding forums or IRC, and you're on page 9, of pagination, and it's like, oh, the correct answer is not till page 14. We were really singularly focused on that question answer pair, but the truth is that most people don't experience Stack Overflow as a monolithic single community, right? You go to Stack Overflow because you're a Python developer. You don't know what's going on in R world or in C# world. So it's really thousands of communities, and there's overlap, sure, between your tech stack. And I think that's one of the problems that we run into lots of times, is people expect it to be just one thing. There are more people on Stack Overflow than there are programmers in the world, right?
Really?
Yeah. People that have to do a little bit of programming on the side or something like that for their jobs. They want to do a side project, anything like that. By our best estimates, when I was working there, we thought there were around 27 to 30 million programmers, and Stack Overflow itself had 45 million people using it every single month, unique people. And so really, that was a long rant to say, it's not just the community separation on the Stack Exchange network, like there's Stack Overflow, then there's Bitcoin Stack Exchange and mathematics Stack Exchange. It's like, even within those things, each tag itself is almost its own community, and it can't be governed really monolithically. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Bitcoin Stack Exchange is one of my favorite resources. Shout out to Merch and everybody who helps curate that exchange, particularly. If you're, if you have a question about Bitcoin, it's probably been asked there before.
They've done an excellent job there. They're really high signal, one of the best resources, I think, on the internet for keeping up to date information. If you're trying to connect your node over the Tor network or something like that, you're going to find a good answer there. And people like Merch, the moderators on these sites, do all the dirty deeds. That's the way Stack Overflow works. It's not the people working there that are curating all the content. It's the moderators of each individual site, and they do a lot of unsung work.
No, it is, and that's my favorite place, and that's what I love about Bitcoin Optech too. They have like a Bitcoin Stack Exchange highlight of the week, and you can go there. Peter Woolers answer questions. The people building out the protocol are answering questions at the Bitcoin Stack Exchange. So if you freaks haven't checked that out, definitely go peep it. Especially if you have like a technical question about Bitcoin. Again, it's probably been asked there. And well, so you transition from Stack Overflow, working on that product, to building Bitcoin native products at Unchained Capital. What was that transition like? How did you sort of change hats there? It seems like two very different products.
Yeah, really different products. And the whole time I was at Stack, I had this theory. I was working as the VP of product there, and we, built out a product team, product managers, designers, and I had this idea of building out that team that the least important thing in hiring those types of people was domain expertise. Meaning, if you got really smart people that understood software development, they could create pretty much any software that they wanted to. And you see this in Bitcoin. Most people come in pretty green. They spend some time, they do reviews, they do, and then they start contributing on more trivial things and then more serious things. Is that the domain expertise is less important than the ability to understand product development cycles and be an expert in that. So I wasn't worried about transitioning, also because I had the enthusiasm of being around Bitcoin. I mean, the entire time I was at Stack Overflow. But the impetus for the transition was really that I had I'd say, kind of a flawed view of Bitcoin entrepreneurship, which was, for a long time, I looked at it and I said, if I'm not contributing to the core protocol, then there's not much else to do. And I was actually searching around for ways to do that. I'd talked to guys like John Newberry, Steve Lee, to see if there was anything I could do. There was the whole bit process and I could do some writing or something. But the reality is, with a demanding job at Stack, I wasn't going to be able to do much there. And I found an outlet actually in Wyoming. And that really opened up the doors, joining the blockchain task force out there last year in 2019. And going in thinking this is a way I can, spend a limited amount of time and actually do something good for the Bitcoin world, trying to create legislation and lend expertise that would create a favorable jurisdiction for Bitcoin companies. That's a worthy thing to spend my time on. And turns out there's a lot of Bitcoin companies circling around these events, all the sessions that we hold. And there was a little bit of me just realizing that my view of Bitcoin entrepreneurship, that I had a skill set that would be valuable in Bitcoin, and that I could contribute quite a bit. And there was a lot of shame, just being shamed by people. So they're like, you know so much about this. What the fuck are you doing? Stack's cool. Thanks, but what the fuck, dude? You're wasting your life. And I got enough of that I realized that I really was. Not that Stack is a really cool place, but follow your passion, do the thing that you really love.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I don't know where I want to go now. Let's focus on Wyoming for a little bit. We touched on that before. Actually, last time we touched on it was with Trace Mayer, who seems to be a persona non grata right now. But
shake my head.
So what was that experience like working with the legislator there? Having conversations with these politicians, and what did you guys get accomplished, and how is this good for Bitcoin, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, and Trace was circling around there. This is before the all the stuff with American HODL and all that. And I won't get into that because I haven't talked to Trace since that happened. I don't think anyone has really. But anyway, he was great in Wyoming, and I went in actually kind of skeptical there. So they were they had actually started in 2018. I wasn't a part of the first sort of iteration of it, and it was a legislator named Tyler Lindholm who was really the champion within Wyoming that wanted to do something there. And really simple idea, which is Wyoming is an economy that is dependent on energy and tourism, basically, for their entire GDP, and that's where all the jobs are, and they needed to diversify the economy, and they wanted to find an unfair way to compete, and that's kind of a cool setup here. So he was looking at this saying there's something happening in the world here, and we have the opportunity to outflank every other jurisdiction, because that is the goal there, right? Is they're competing with other sovereigns to create a jurisdiction that is attractive to individuals and businesses that want to deal with this sort of new economy. And being Wyoming, they, there's just a small state, right? Everyone knows each other. There's not a lot of left-right political infighting, at the legislative group, and everyone kind of had a singular goal here. And the way it's set up is, you have these experts, come into the public. They're invited to the sessions. They get to testify on why it sucks to be in New York City living under the BIT license, and we get to look at each other and say, okay, cool, let's create the anti-BIT license, right? Fuck them. Let's outflank them every way we can. And these legislators are pretty passionate about it, and they bring in this sort of domain expertise to the public. And they invited a few citizens, Caitlin Long, which I'm sure the freaks here are familiar with, Matt Kaufman, who's I think the only securities lawyer in Wyoming, another awesome person, and myself joined last year to help out on these things. And what we accomplished, I mean, there's a lot. First of all, Wyoming was in a bad spot when this all started. So most of the exchanges had pulled out of Wyoming between 2015 and 2017 because of their interpretation of Wyoming's money transmitter license rules. Basically, they decided that they couldn't operate there. And I had my mother-in-law had bought Bitcoin already, and she was on Coinbase and hadn't moved to control her own keys yet. Her Bitcoin was locked up for 3 years. Coinbase would not allow you to access them. It was a fucking
Really?
Oh, it was a disaster. Yeah, and they wouldn't answer any emails. There was no customer support. Like nothing. Like just forced hodl, which not the worst thing in the world, but at the same time, scary shit.
I thought they're crypto forward though. I think they have some good customer support.
They give you your crypto 3 years forward, and yeah, I think that's what it means. Yeah. No, I mean, nightmare scenario though, right? Like you can't, I mean, she couldn't even log into her account, much less, they weren't blocking a transaction or anything. She just couldn't access it.
I had no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think there were a few other states like that. I think Minnesota got hit by it, Hawaii. There were like 4 MTL issues in states. I could be wrong. Sorry. I only know for sure of Wyoming, but I know there were a few other. And when the task force started up, like the first thing they did, the first accomplishment was, let's change this MTL to signal to everyone that, at least get to parity, that these companies can operate here, these on-ramp, off-ramp companies. So that passed really, really quickly, which in most places, it's hard to get legislation like that through. We tried this year to eliminate the MTL license entirely. That was one of the things that I worked really hard on. And unfortunately, I think out of the 26 bills that have been pushed, that's like 1 of 3 that has been turned down. So I lost that one.
You can always bring it back up.
Yeah, I mean, it could take a few years. But I believe Montana is the only state that does not have a money transmitter license. Based on what I had researched when we were going through that. But, really all that stuff was sort of the reach parity. I would say, there's a lot of things that have been accomplished in this time. The really big one is the SPDI, the Special Purpose Depository Institution. I think Trace probably talked about that last time, so I won't go into too much detail, except that they're taking applications now. So people that might have heard it back then, it was still sort of a conceptual thing. It was still waiting to be passed and amended. There are, tens, if not hundreds of applications in already. I won't divulge any of the names, but there will be some big announcements. I think one that's actually been announced is Caitlin's Avanti bank that she's building. They've already announced that they're going through that process, and we'll start seeing our first SPDI companies come online here, either really late this year or early next year. And the significance of that, I mean, I think there's a couple things. One is, Wyoming was the inventor of the LLC. Pretty unknown thing, but Wyoming LLCs are still super popular because of their privacy. Their privacy governance. You don't have to disclose the name of directors and some things where I think Delaware, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nevada are probably the largest issuers of LLCs in the nation. And I think Wyoming's done it again here. I think what we've come up with the SPDI is a new corporate formation that's going to be really attractive to Bitcoin financial service companies, custodians, payment processors, that they'll at least have some form of their business, is my prediction, over the next couple of years operating out of Wyoming because of the benefits. Some of those benefits are you get a much better connection into the fiat world. Right now, we know of so many companies that get cut off from the fiat world because of their lack of participation in the Federal Reserve group of banks. SPDIs are eligible for that access, which I know that, some people are going to say Bitcoin doesn't give a shit about that stuff. Totally true. Bitcoin's fine without it. This just helps, right? It's a cherry on top. It's not necessary for Bitcoin to thrive, but it's something that Wyoming is uniquely positioning itself to make it less of a pain in the ass for these companies to get fiat banking services. It sets up a chancery court in the state of Wyoming that deals specifically with the issues that come up with this type of corporate formation. So we'll be getting laws on the books, jurisdictional certainty for companies that come in and know that the rug's not going to get pulled out from under them. They're going to be screwed, or they're not going to be, dished out to some other court in some other state with rules that they didn't know they were being beholden to. Again, Bitcoin doesn't give a shit. Bitcoin can be very successful without any of this. But I can say personally, as someone who's now a part of running a Bitcoin company, this is pretty attractive stuff. Being able to have this sort of certainty that your own government's not going to pull the rug out from under you.
Yeah, it's huge. Thank you for all that work that you did in Wyoming. I mean, and hopefully it incites other states to make similar moves, and it just becomes more commonplace, and it will be interesting to see, like you just alluded to, how many companies actually move to Wyoming, and if that makes other states jealous, especially if Bitcoin becomes more commonplace throughout the U.S. and between U.S. citizens. You shared a chart with me the other week about like Wyoming could, like, how much funding the state has compared to other states, like particularly New York, New Jersey, Illinois.
How much funding? I'm trying to remember what that chart was. Are you talking about the sovereign wealth fund that they run?
That, or it was something to do like with the budgets, like how much.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the budget surplus, and Wyoming's really weird because I think it's so funny. I don't want to lecture anyone here, but like the states write stuff. You go into these legislative groups, and it doesn't matter if you're a liberal or a conservative. Like the people in state legislators, they take the 10th Amendment really seriously. And the United States is so primed to dominate in a Bitcoin world because of the fact that we have states that are sovereign. And what you're talking about, I think, is related to, where does Wyoming's budget come from? Wyoming has its own sovereign wealth fund. I think it's one of 3 states, at least it used to be. New Mexico and Alaska also had a sovereign wealth fund. There might be more now, but because of all the energy production here and the fact that there's no state income tax, property taxes are super low, like this is a good base for individuals on the tax side of things. They get most of their taxes through, these energy companies that are drilling oil, the coal industry, natural gas, all of that. And it's a huge fund. And they use that money for a lot of their budget. They have, if they have budget problems with their schools, the sovereign wealth fund comes in and, covers the gap between the taxes, and it helps keep the taxes low. And that sovereign wealth fund is controlled by the treasurer ultimately, but also has like a chief investment officer who invests that money on the behalf of the citizens of Wyoming, just kind of like Abu Dhabi or Singapore or anything like that. And so yeah, I can't remember the exact numbers of the chart I showed you, but on a per capita basis, Wyoming's in good shape because of that fund. Doesn't have as many, they still get budgetary shortfalls when it comes to tax revenues and things like that, but it's a good backstop.
If I remember correctly, I think compared to like the baseline, it was something like 400 times overfunded.
Yeah.
Compared to other states or something like that. It's like something insane.
I mean, let's be, honest here. It helps when you have about, 520,000 people in the state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be, again, with the lax Bitcoin regulation, now Kanye making it popular to move to Wyoming. It'll be interesting to see if a bunch of people begin moving there. I mean, I've looked at land in Wyoming. It's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Wait, man. Kanye moved to Wyoming?
Yeah, Cody.
He's
Bill Gates and Warren Buffett's neighbor up there in Cody, Wyoming. He did a church
Wow.
service that my wife was talking about. I wasn't up there during it, but she was. Yeah,
Did she
embraced. What's that?
Did she go?
No, she was driving back and said, "Hey, we just missed this thing," and I was very disappointed. I think Kanye is a great man, and I don't know much about his music. I just think he's a great man, and would have liked to have met him up there.
No, that's one of my wife's biggest goals, is to get to a Kanye Sunday service. But yeah, Matt, he's building a Citadel in Wyoming.
Yeah,
That's badass. Is it near Jackson Hole? I don't know Wyoming at all.
So Cody is sort of northeast of the Yellowstone Park, really close to the Montana border. Jackson's on the south side of Yellowstone. So I mean, still relatively close, but a couple hours. They're both in the northwest part of the state.
It's interesting how it's become like this rich enclave, Wyoming.
Yeah, it's just that area, really. The rest of the state, that's not true. Wyoming is a very working class place. It's almost all ranching, agriculture, oil and gas type blue collar jobs. You have this little spot in Teton County, and then out to Cody, a little bit up in Sheridan on the other side of the state as well, near the Bighorn Mountains. But Jackson's a very singular thing that's very different from the rest of Wyoming, I would say. Beautiful, love it, but it's not representative at all.
I've actually I've been getting meats delivered by a rancher, Carter Country Meats, out in Wyoming.
Yes. Are you getting it in the Yeti cooler?
I have not. That my next order I'm going to. I think I'm gonna do it. I've been getting the eco-friendly boxes to date.
Those guys are great. A lot of the butcher shops that I go to in Wyoming source their meat from Carter Country. Awesome. They're up in Tin Sleep, Wyoming, middle of nowhere. Awesome place. They're an awesome company. You can order online. They have a deal with Yeti that's based in Austin, Texas, where you can refill your meat supplies, keep it cold, and the best cold cooler in the world. And they're an awesome shop.
They are. Their meat's really good too.
Mm-hmm.
They threw in a tomahawk at my last order. That was incredible.
Nice.
Thick tomahawks. But from steaks to multi-sig.
Yeah.
To Bitcoin native products. What you were mentioning this before we hit record. You and Parker have been having conversations about Bitcoin native versus Bitcoin only. Is it verse or?
No, it's not verse. And yeah, I've been talking with Parker and Joe Kelly and Drew and a bunch of people at Unchained really about this. Phil Geiger is I know that I remember listening, Matt, actually to you on Peter McCormack, where y'all were talking a lot about the Bitcoin only companies. And one of the things that attracted me to Unchained was I don't hold it, the exchanges, doing all the exchange business model, having lots of different cryptocurrencies, it doesn't bother me all that much. But it wasn't a super attractive thing for me to work on. And when I was talking with the Unchained folks about joining them, like the focus on Bitcoin was certainly one of the things that, got me going. It's what I wanted to spend my time on, and they had Unchained has some history with this, right? Originally, early on, they did both Bitcoin and Ethereum backed loans. And I think it's important to bring this up because it wasn't just like some Bitcoin maximalist, company that started that way. It was a pragmatic decision to go to Bitcoin only. And that decision was really twofold. Was that the market, 3% of our business was in Ethereum because people weren't really using it as money. And the second is that when you're a startup and you have limited resources and you really want to, and you're dealing with something that requires such, strong security, it stretches your engineering teams thin when you want to do it the right way. And we were not outsourcing custody of our loan products back then. Drew, our CTO, was not happy with the custody options and didn't want to put our users in that position. So we, went to the Bitcoin protocol and did native multi-sig for collateral for loans. On Ethereum, we one of our really, really brilliant developers created our own smart contract, and but it also scared the shit out of us. We really felt good about the Bitcoin stuff, but the smart contract stuff, just hear horror story after horror story. And even the engineer Destry who built that smart contract, I think he told me he was relieved when we dropped that. And so I said, I end up joining what becomes a Bitcoin only company. And as we're thinking about it, like, there are lots of companies that are Bitcoin only, and I think that helps for the reasons I just mentioned. But I didn't think it was really descriptive enough, and trying to describe like why these companies are Bitcoin only. I don't think it's because the companies are full of Bitcoin maximalists or something like that. Our company has a wide variety of opinions on cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. Not everyone's me or Parker, right? And so this idea of like Bitcoin native kind of popped up, and we're not trying to define for other people what Bitcoin native means, but for us, I think it's an apt description of what we're doing, because we have this idea of all those sort of tenets of Bitcoin that when you get into it, that you first think about, like, you learn about the supply cap, and you learn about sovereignty, and you learn about censorship resistance, auditability, security, things like that. You learn about these like aspects, and the challenge that we've kind of put to ourselves is, okay, if we want to be Bitcoin native, like, how do we respect these things? Like, how do we get ourselves close to these things? So I think about the Bitcoin supply cap. Like, what does a company have to do with Bitcoin supply cap? And then I think back to S2X. And when you have industry and companies trying to be forceful around the decisions around the protocol, like forcing hard fork, the only way Bitcoin supply cap is ever going to get screwed up is through a hard fork, right? And when you start demanding it because of your own business, right, and trying to form your own consensus, then you put that in jeopardy. Like, I'm of the opinion that that unless something existential comes up, there won't be another hard fork, because that's the only way you can change the most important thing about Bitcoin, that there's 21 million of them, and that's not negotiable. So the Bitcoin native approach to that is to not put yourself in a bad position where you're trying to push things that could put something like that in danger, right? Where, companies, for better or worse, sometimes can have an outsized voice and, or at least think they do, in some of these decisions, and, have sort of this policy and this understanding that you're not going to play that game. And then there's, some more like practical things, like sort of the sayings that we all come into Bitcoin, sort of hearing eventually, which, not your keys, not your Bitcoin, don't trust, verify, those types of things. How do we sort of embody that as a company if we want to? And really, this isn't necessarily because we're altruistic, or it's because this is the types of products that Bitcoiners demand from us. Like, we have to meet market demand. So building a Bitcoin native company and Bitcoin native products to us looks like, okay, let's start with not your keys, not your Bitcoin. You want to build a lending product. Shit, this is going to be hard, right? Like, okay, we're going to do Bitcoin collateralized loans, but we really care about custody, and okay, this is going to be a hard problem to solve, right? And this is kind of, this is before I started. This is Drew and Joe really thinking through this problem and deciding that the best way to do this would be not to outsource, or to become a full custodian, but to allow the borrower to participate in the quorum of keys that is controlling that Bitcoin. So yeah, it's still, you can't have sovereignty over your collateral, because then you could take the dollars, take the Bitcoin and go run off. No one's going to lend you dollars in that sense. But if we say something, which we do, like, we're not going to rehypothecate your collateral, right? We're not going to go gamble with your collateral, because the whole reason that you're taking out this loan is you don't want to lose your Bitcoin. You don't have to trust us. You can get a key, you can spy on that address, and you can verify that we're not moving your funds. That was sort of the Bitcoin native way of doing loans, our best estimation. And maybe there's a better way, and we're going to keep on, trying to find it. And it's the same thing for custody in general, right? That was our second product that we came out with. And this idea that how do we make multi-sig, which I mean, I would argue is still fairly obscure amongst, even, semi-hardcore Bitcoiners. How do we make this more ubiquitous? How do we get this into more people's hands? Because we know that there's demand for sovereignty, but it's not easy to do. And that there are some forms of self-sovereignty that, even though that's great, better than having it on an exchange, isn't necessarily secure. And so what's that look like? And that was sort of the rabbit hole we went down with collaborative custody. And that's our vaults product, where we do 2 of 3 multi-sig, and your listeners know this. You've done the drill on this. I won't go into too many details there. And but the sort of reasoning behind it and the way we're thinking about our strategy is thinking about this idea of Bitcoin native. How do we build our products that are as close to the protocol as possible, that are taking advantage of Bitcoin's unique qualities? Like, you can't do a loan the way we do without Bitcoin. You can't give the borrower some of the benefits of knowing what's happening with their collateral without Bitcoin. And that's a pretty cool thing, because what I want to be able to do, being a part of a financial services company, is not mimic what's happening in financial services today. It's building things that are unique to Bitcoin, because that's where we can win and where we can diverge from the legacy system. Plus, there are business models and financial services that just won't work in Bitcoin. And so you have to find new ways to do things. And the more you understand about the native way Bitcoin works, the more successful you'll be in building that type of company.
Can we unpack this a little bit? Because I think people are more confused than we often realize, I've noticed.
Okay.
With regards to the way you do your collateralized loan product.
Okay.
Compared to a custodial solution, which is what most of these loan offerings are, where there's full custody.
Mm-hmm.
You want to explain that for the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys sort of get looped into competitors who don't let users track their collateral.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, and it is a nuanced thing. It's kind of hard to understand what the repercussions of that are. So I'll do my best job here that I can. So the way we do loans is, for whatever reason, if you want dollars and you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, an option is to take a loan against that Bitcoin. I'm not here to push that on anyone or anything. If you don't want to do that, don't do that. If you want to sell your Bitcoin, do that. It comes with consequences. If you have to meet margin calls, it can be fucking scary. But also, it can, done right, it can be something that really helps you out in your life. If you don't want to sell your Bitcoin and but you need dollars for whatever reason. So the way we do that is, you have to give us Bitcoin. We collateralize it basically at a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you want $100,000, or if you want $20,000, let's say you wanted $20,000, you would give us at that time $40,000 worth of Bitcoin, and we would put it into a multi-sig arrangement where you have one of the keys, we have one of the keys, and a third party that we have a contract with has one key. And that setup is interesting for a few reasons. One is, unlike having it in a full custody option, there's not a single point of failure. So if, say, you lost your key, or we lost our key, or the third party lost their key, we still have a way to sweep those funds into a new address. For hacker purposes and things like that, there's not one custodian to come after your collateral. And remember, you're taking this loan out typically because specifically you don't want to sell. Like you want to get this Bitcoin back is the reason you're doing this. So all those security measures, I would think that you would care about how your Bitcoin's being stored, similarly to if you were storing it yourself. Obviously, we can't give you full sovereignty over the Bitcoin in this type of arrangement. But it's not just that you have that key, right? And it's not just that the security is better in this model. It's also that we promise that when you give us your Bitcoin, we are not going to then take that Bitcoin and then go lend it out to other, market makers, short sellers, et cetera, and to go gamble with your Bitcoin. Again, the whole purpose you gave us this Bitcoin to begin with was that you didn't want to lose it, right? So we're going to do everything we can to help that not happen, which includes not rehypothecating, which is what that means, right? When you have collateral that then gets lent out and lent out and lent out, we don't do that. It just sits there. And you don't have to trust us. You have a key. You can look at that address and you can see if we move it. And if we do, we've broken our contract with you. Or something bad has happened and you can call us out on that. That's never happened. We don't expect it to, but it's a way for you to hold us accountable and to sort of keep that ethos in mind, right? The, don't trust, verify nature that Bitcoin allows us to have this relationship with our clients. And I'm going to stop there for a minute.
Yeah, there's trust, but it's trust minimized.
Yeah.
Significantly from a full custodial offering.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, there is trust, and I don't want to, make anyone think that there isn't. When you do this, you are KYCing with us. Hell, I wish we didn't have to, but when you're offering this type of financial service in the jurisdictions that we operate in, it's the game that we play. If people don't want to use it because of that reason, totally support that, right? But I still, I look at competitors out there who do full custody. Maybe they save you a point on the interest rate because they're rehypothecating your Bitcoin or something like that, and that's not the type of product I would want. I look at the DeFi options and the shit show with all the flash crashes and everything that happened, and there, and you don't have anyone to call or anyone to talk to. You got customer service, you have a trust minimized option, you can hold this accountable. I think that's a pretty legit product offering. And honestly, I'm not a loan customer. Like I didn't use that product myself, but when I met Joe and Drew originally, and they described kind of the crazy lengths they went through to try to build this product in the most Bitcoin native way they could, with trust minimization, with this custody model. I was pretty impressed, to be honest. This is before I worked there, and it made me more interested in the company overall.
Yeah, that's what really impressed me about Drew and Joe early on. Drew was on this podcast very early in the game. He approached it with a security first mindset, and then making sure that he could build the products in-house and secure the Bitcoin. And at one point, he had the only audited Ethereum smart contract that was actually legitimately safe. It was at one point
as safe as we could get it. Right?
Yeah. And then the product just grew from there, asking customers what they wanted. People asked for the loan product, and it's all right, we're going to build it, and we'll give that to you in this way if you want it. And again, with the security first mindset, I think what's most admirable and why I love working with you guys is you open source everything. If you're using these tools, you want Bitcoiners to have the same security that your products have. You just open source the tools that you're using, and I think that's extremely admirable. And so I guess it was a natural segue into Caravan and why you guys do that.
Yeah, Caravan's is a cool thing that we've been working on, and as you mentioned, it's very similar. We didn't talk as much about the vault stuff, but that same sort of sharing of keys you can do with just a vault where you take two keys and we take one as a backup. In that case, you're giving up privacy, right? So we know the address and the amount in there, but we don't have the ability to move funds. So there are trade-offs again in this scenario. With Caravan, Caravan really is kind of a pick your poison, do whatever you want type thing, right? It is open source. It's built much in the same way. It's a little bit more flexible than our own proprietary product. And we're starting to use more and more of the Caravan underlying libraries in our proprietary product, again, for that trust minimization to live up to our own standard there. But mostly what our decision to build Caravan and release it in November of last year was this concept of, well, what makes us special as a company is actually not multi-sig. In fact, we think that multi-sig is going to be commoditized, everyone's going to use it in some fashion or another, and that's not our secret sauce. It's not, just like financial services companies, they compete on technology, and they are technology companies to some extent, but multi-sig was certainly not a defensible technology that we were going to like win in the market on. And so one of the things that we made a conscious decision of was trying to put our thumb on the scale and get more people using multi-sig, whether they're using our product or not. And I think having a dedicated open source multi-sig product out there is something that will appeal to some people that our proprietary product won't appeal to, which is fine. But it's better to get more people on multi-sig. It also creates more conversations and breeding ground for all the different people that are working on multi-sig to, talk about standard, talk about interoperability, and talk about, the software and hardware interoperability that you need to do multi-sig self-sovereignty. So Caravan, what it started out as, was really that idea that everyone should be using multi-sig, whether it's through our proprietary product or not, and also it could benefit our proprietary product. So what if you had a vault with us where you had 2 keys and we had 1, and our website was down? Like, what would you do? You could go to Electrum, but Electrum is it's fabulous software in a lot of ways, but it does a lot of stuff. It's multi-purpose. It's kind of, the best thing about it is that it does everything, and the worst thing about it is that it does everything. And we were thinking that to make people feel really secure with using multi-sig, even on our proprietary side, we needed a backup. What if we're not around for you? What if we can't countersign? What if you don't even want us to countersign, but you're just using us as a coordinator and our website goes down? What are you going to do? Well, you can easily just take your keys, go over to Caravan, and do your spends through there without permission from anyone. And that's pretty cool. I think it both does something for the open source world and multi-sig, like I started at the beginning, but it also helps our product, or anybody's product that's offering something similar to us, is that their clients can go to Caravan and spend outside of that proprietary world. It started off as pretty naive, right? We wanted to do one thing and one thing well, and it was more of an address coordinator. When you started, you'd come in, you'd have your private keys, you need your redeem script and BIP32 pass. Put in the redeem script, put in the BIP32 pass. You can sign, you can generate that address and spend it however you wanted. Recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've released an update to Caravan, which I think y'all covered a little bit on. But the main difference here is that it's no longer an address coordinator. It's really a full-blown multi-sig wallet. And that was a big step in terms of functionality and value for open source customers. So the big changes here, number one is just XPubs. Is that instead of dealing with just redeem scripts and public keys, you're now dealing on the XPub layer, which is generating a multi-sig wallet, coordinating all these extended public keys, and then next after that, giving you the ability to spend from any of the addresses in that wallet. So it's not a single address thing anymore. That was really big. Some cool little things that we can do now, like you can download your like a little JSON file, sort of similar to Cold Card where you do wallet initialization. It's the same information. You can download the pub key, the XPubs, BIP32 pass, etc. You can store that securely however you want. Good thing to note on that. What are the repercussions of losing a file like that? No one can steal your Bitcoin because they can't sign with that stuff, but you do lose privacy if you lose that file. So best to encrypt it, put it in a password manager, however you feel safe doing that, depending on the value of what you're storing in that wallet. It's not the end of the world if you lose that file, but you'll probably want to sweep funds if you do. But anyway, you can get that nice, cool file that so that you're not manually plugging stuff in every time, or you can manually plug stuff in every time. Doesn't matter. Initialize the wallet, and boom, your wallet's up on Caravan. And the reason I bring that up is that Caravan is stateless. So it's not like you have an account that you can log into and it's remembering the details of your wallet. Every time you interact with Caravan, it's every new session, basically, you have to build the wallet from scratch.
It's tabula rasa.
And the state is essentially saved in the JSON file.
Well, yeah, that's what builds the wallet, and you don't have to use that. Once you build the wallet the first time, you can decide like, hey, I'm going to use this a lot, and I want to encrypt this file on my computer. You can download that JSON file, or if you're bringing, there's still, again, one of the reasons is we got to figure this out amongst people that are doing this. Electrum allows you to create a file like this, so does Cold Card. We want to get something that is interoperable between everything there.
Yeah, and that's like you mentioned, that's standardization is a huge unknown right now, and that's why I like this version of Caravan particularly, is because of the testing suite that you guys built that can sort of start pushing the ball down that path.
Yeah.
Is that a correct assumption to make with the testing suite?
Yeah, I mean, it's the ultimate goal. It's not there yet, but that is kind of, if Caravan's successful, this is one of the ways it can succeed. Even if it's not successful as a ubiquitous wallet that everyone's using, say if hardware manufacturers, before they release new firmware or something like that, ran their hardware through this testing suite that that Caravan has, which is checking some standard multi-signature bit32 paths, that is making sure that the hardware wallet can generate and sign all the different addresses, P2SH, P2WSH, P2SH P2WSH, all that type of stuff. You're kind of going through the suite and making sure that it's compatible with all the different multi-sig addresses that you want to send to. If we could do that, I think that alone would be a really big win. And through the process of developing Caravan, we've had other wins like this, like where Trezor has an open source, it's open source as well. We noticed that there was no way for us to confirm multi-sig addresses on the device, which is something we really, it's a security flaw, right? Man-in-the-middle attacks on your browser and stuff like that. And you can mitigate them, and but at the same time, if you really want to be sure, you want to get that address showing up on the hardware device to confirm it. We were able to collaborate. Really, it didn't take much. I think Drew wrote some code, put in a PR. Trezor guys responded, liked it, got it into Trezor Connect 8, and so once we updated Trezor Connect 8, now when you're on Caravan, you can confirm multi-sig addresses on the device. That's the type of win that I want to come through Caravan. And I think that it's reasonable to expect that if that were just our proprietary app, or we're just pushing this stuff through that it wouldn't be as convincing. And it's nice to have Caravan to kind of build up those use cases and
those fundamentals. It's yeah, I mean, it's funny, not funny, but it's incredible to see how fast this new version of Caravan came out. Because when Drew demoed it, the first version of Caravan in the fall to us, he asked what do you guys want? And the first question I asked is why can't I dump an Xpub in here? And to see 5 months later, 6 months later, that it's already there it's incredible. You guys are reacting to user feedback, which is what I'd like to see in a Bitcoin native company. It's reacting to the users, not really just building stuff just to build.
Yeah, there's no use building that. Oh, go ahead.
The key there for the listeners is you don't want to reuse addresses.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I look at it and say there was a reason we had built things in a way, at the beginning, but certainly the way people were using our product over time, they wanted more wallet functionality, right? They wanted to, even though it's a cold storage vault, it turns out if you build a really good cold storage vault that isn't a pain in the ass to use, people will transact. Most of it, might be staying in cold storage, but you realize that you do want to spend from it more often and move money around. And we had to sort of react to oh shit, this isn't just going to sit in an address forever. And bringing that wallet functionality was a really big deal. The other thing is that it's also just absolutely necessary in order to work with, anything that's PSBT. So Cold Card, probably future versions of Trezor. I'm assuming at some point they're going to use that little SD card for PSBT.
Any day now.
I keep on hearing it. They're using it for something. I don't know what it was. It was something really
it's like 2FA.
Yeah, it was kind of obscure and weird. I mean, it's fine, and I assume they're going to do it eventually. But I know Christopher Allen's working on some open source iPhone wallet that's PSBT based that we want to make sure Caravan
fully noted.
Yeah, fully noted. That's right.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see Ledger add PSBT too.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, all of them should.
Biggest question from the freaks who want to use Caravan is when Cold Card.
Yeah, dude, I hear it all the time. I tease our director of product marketing, Phil Geiger, who I think every time anyone ever asks him about Cold Card, he sends me a message, which means I get multiple messages every single day about it. And he points to Twitter every single time someone responds to some Unchained tweet with, when Cold Card. And I'm convinced at this point that he's just creating sock puppets and trolling me to speed up the development here. It's actively being worked on right now. So if you know Caravan, there are some open source libraries that it uses, primarily Unchained Wallets and Unchained Bitcoin, both open source. Unchained Wallets is is how Caravan interacts with all the different hardware wallets. And so the first thing that we're doing is we are finally ripping the Band-Aid off, and our internal proprietary product is going to be consuming Unchained Wallets and how it interacts with hardware wallets, which is a big first step. And the next step in that is, is adding PSBT and Cold Card support to Unchained Wallets. Happening right now. It's a lot of work, because we're teaching Caravan and our products about PSBT for the first time. But we know everyone wants to see it. I love Cold Card. I love the guys that work on Cold Card. And it's a fantastic product. We're going to get it supported real soon here.
Soon, TM. It's coming, freaks.
Yeah.
It's just,
2 weeks.
I've said it so many times in the ad read. They're like, "When's it coming?" I'm like, it's coming.
You can point your tweets towards me, and every tweet speeds it up a day. No. Actually, please don't do that. I know how much I roll. Yeah.
No, take your time. Do it right.
Yeah.
Don't do it at all. That's the way to do it. Guess what, Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to all this sounds really complicated. Like, the reason Caravan is such a big deal is because it is insanely simple to use for what you would expect. You would think it'd be way more complicated, but it's worth it for people to just go give it a try. If you have a Trezor T and you can enter the passphrase right on the touch screen, you're able to create multiple wallets. Every passphrase is a different wallet, so you can actually simulate a multi-sig with a single piece of hardware. With very little, put a very little bit of Bitcoin in there, then spend it out. That's my favorite way to learn, is to actually try it and do it. And I think it's well within reach of a lot of the freaks when they think it's more overwhelming than it is.
Yeah, you've been making drunk multi-sigs with Caravan.
Yeah, not advised, according to Unchained Capital, but it is possible. If American Hodl can make a multi-sig drunk, I think most of the freaks can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love that. I mean, we really do want to make multi-sig easy, and conceptually, it can seem intimidating. But I'm telling you, if you go in and play with it, you're gonna figure it out. If you have a hardware wallet, if you have a Trezor, if you have a Ledger, get going. I'd love to hear your feedback. That's another, one of the things with Caravan is we're not being super ambitious with features. I don't want it to be everything for everyone. I want it to be really good at a very narrow set of things. And I want it to be simple and simple to use. So it's supposed to be a multi-sig stateless wallet. I want it to be an awesome multi-sig stateless wallet. Yeah, there's some features I want to add, but mostly we want to battle test this. And if you're interested in that, excuse me, it's open source. Go play with it. Tweet at us, put in a PR, do whatever you want to do. Tell us why it's awesome or sucks. It's really helpful.
So I'm trying to think of where I want to go here. So Caravan version 2's out. Like, what like you mentioned, you want some more stuff in it. Like how do you think it could be better moving forward?
I want it to be easier to add new hardware wallets that it supports. So whether it's cold card, fully noted, I have, I get all these people sending me hardware wallets now, and got to try them out and see if we can support them. So it's easier for hardware wallet manufacturers if they want to get supported in Caravan. So we want to make that whole process a little bit easier. I'd like to be able to get into address labeling. I know that that's been asked for many times and would be super helpful. I want to make it easier for people that are using multisig on other platforms. So standardization around this wallet initialization to make sure that Caravan can be interoperable. Obviously we want it to be operable with the Unchained vaults, but interoperable with any multisig vault that you might have out there, because it can be a backup for everyone there. So those are the types of things, and really making sure that we keep our own ambitions kind of neutral, to the sense that we're being hyper reactive to the open source people that form around this that really care about it, because we know our use cases for it, but there's going to be a lot more that comes out there, and it takes time for these things to grow.
Yeah. You mentioned the labeling, and when we went through the demo, you explained to us why it's sort of tricky with multisig. What are the problems with labeling currently?
It's not that there are problems necessarily. It's just that it's not an easy feature to bring in, and it wasn't something that looking at the priority of stuff, like this was a bear to build. Like this, I've been learning this since December, right? I haven't been around building stuff on Bitcoin for a super long time. Is that I wanted to really, more than anything, reduce the feature set to something that we could be really proud of and know that it was secure. And the labeling stuff, more than anything, just came down to a nice to have at that point. Like, get the wallet functionality rock solid, get the sort of UTXO management rock solid, all of that stuff first. It's not that address labeling is impossible or anything like that. It's just one of those things that will come with time.
And the reason labeling is nice is because you have this nice coin control where you could pick which UTXOs you spend from Caravan. But let's say 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, you're trying to pick which UTXOs you're going to spend, and you don't know what those UTXOs are from. So if you have these nice labels, then you can go back and you could be like, okay, I bought these from Cash App, or I got this from an invoice I sent, or whatnot.
These coins are KYC, these ones aren't. I mean, there's lots of valid reasons to want to label. And, just, from Caravan's perspective, there are other wallets that do it. So we want to be interoperable. We want to be a backup. We want to, stuff like that. We're going to want to be able to do that for sure.
I kind of want to talk about Hermit because I think it's badass and we don't talk about it enough.
Ooh.
Do you want to shill us Hermit?
I'm the wrong person for that. Hermit is badass, and we don't talk about it enough. And it's something that that I know I should know more about, but I haven't spent a lot of time on yet. In my first few months working at Unchained. So maybe that's a good reason to get Drew on again. One of these days, since he hasn't been around for a long time.
What is the high level on Hermit again?
Hermit basically. It's a good way to sign, right? Like, we can use it. It's open source again. So I'll pull up here. If you give me just a second.
Well, the cool thing about Hermit for me is that it has Shamir's secret sharing, so you can shard a key. So used in combination with multisig, it allows you to take a single multisig key, and then you can split up that key in a bunch of shards. So then you can have, and they have this hierarchy system built into it. So you can have like different levels of shards, if it's an upper management or a lower management. And when the threshold comes together of those different hierarchies, then you can get access to that single key. So you can further, even though the multisig might be a 2 of 3, one of those keys could end up sharded between 100 different people of different hierarchies. So it gets really, really powerful really quickly.
Yeah, it can really help, with geographically dispersed signing, if you corporate governance type things where it's like, oh, okay, well, we had an employee here that had access to one of our keys, or a bit of that key, and now they're gone, and it's a way to really sort of scale up that governance of your how you handle signing for multisig. And it's really cool. It's another tool. It's separate from Caravan that is completely open source. I know that we've had groups like Blockchain Commons and Christopher Allen look into it before, and something that we work on ourselves. We try to consume all of our own open source stuff as well.
Yeah, it's completely badass. And I think, again, fawning over you guys, disclaimer, Unchained's sponsor of this podcast.
Yes. Probably throw that disclaimer in the beginning.
I'll put it in the intro.
Yeah.
When I read the ad. No, I think you guys are leading the way, an example of giving back to Bitcoin through these open source projects. It's not only the open source projects, the blog series. You've written a couple already. Parker's obviously got Gradually Then Suddenly. Phil's writing. Drew's writing some really cool stuff about futuristic use cases of Bitcoin and HODL waves. I think you guys are a great example of giving back to Bitcoin and sort of showing what other companies probably should be doing. Like some that have been around for a while have yet to adopt SegWit or contribute to development of Bitcoin, and you guys are just running a little humble shop in Austin, Texas, working away, just doing hard work and leading by example, in my opinion.
Hey, man. I appreciate it. And, being a relatively new member of the team, this is what you're saying there. That's what attracted me to work there, right? There are a lot of good companies in Bitcoin, but I feel like what we're doing at Unchained right now is doing it the right way. I also wanted to point out one thing that we missed is one of the big things on Hermit is you can do this all air gapped, which is one of the one of the big. That's one of the internal use cases that why we're very high on it. But I do encourage people. There's a good blog that Drew and the team wrote before I joined on Hermit. If you want to go check it out on the Unchained Capital blog, which is dominated by those series that Marty just mentioned, the Gradually Then Suddenlies and multi-sig beginners guides and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's a nice, well-rounded shop. And you guys are adding more products to the mix, too. You've recently, a couple weeks ago or maybe a week ago, announced slowly rolling out an OTC desk in Texas only. How's that been going, and what's that product look like?
Oh, it's cool. One of the things that when I joined is I had this line in my head of, what is a product that I've always wanted that I can uniquely build at a company like Unchained because of some of the stuff that they've already done. And that line is kind of a mouthful, but I think everyone here will get it, which is I want to be able to buy Bitcoin directly into cold storage multisig with keys that I control. Now it's a mouthful, but the concept's simple. I want to be sovereign over my money, and I don't want the counterparty risk of an exchange. And how can I do that? Well, we have the vaults. How can we help people buy directly into the vaults? Well, it's not that simple, right? It's a shit show. There's the regulatory shit show out there. You can't just turn that on, even though technically it's not the craziest thing in the world. So, but we are starting to make that true. It's not a retail thing right now. It's more of an OTC style, high volume type buying activity that is opened up in Texas now. So minimum would be 50K-ish sort of buys. There are institutions and high net worth individuals, stuff like that buy Bitcoin like that. That's what OTCs are for. And when they buy Bitcoin with us, essentially they put in their trade, and their Bitcoin, once the dollar's clear, goes directly into an Unchained vault with keys that they control. I am fucking pumped about this. It's hard to contain my excitement on this. Is that this is something that, we've been telling people forever, don't keep your Bitcoin on exchanges, don't keep your Bitcoin in full custody places, but there aren't really good ways to buy Bitcoin or to receive Bitcoin or to do this on-ramp, off-ramp type transaction where you don't have significant counterparty risk. And again, our solution is not risk less, but again, trying to get to that trust minimized as much as we possibly can. We're at least getting one of those layers sort of out of there. One of those pieces of counterparty risk eliminated, which is keeping your coins for any amount of time on an exchange. So yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's only been going for a couple weeks now. And it is only available in Texas for now. But I think what you'll see is us grow out this OTC sort of functionality throughout the United States. Work on our own internal processes, automation, all that type of stuff that will make this a lot simpler. And then hopefully, if the regulatory stuff works out the way we want it to, be able to do some retail around this eventually. Not this year.
Hell yeah. No, it's been, again, like very interesting to see your product suite evolve. It's from simple collateralized loans to multi-sig vaults and now OTC. Like what do you envision Unchained looking like in 5-10 years? What is the product suite like? What about post-hyper Bitcoinization when you're not even connected to the US dollar at some point? How do you evolve your services then?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're counting on, right? To a certain extent, when you're Bitcoin native or Bitcoin only, right, is that you're sort of throwing out the steering wheel and letting Bitcoin take you where it's going. So we are definitely, number go up is a big thing for us. And, our business sort of goes as Bitcoin goes. And in 5 or 10 years, I mean, I don't want to scare people on the podcast. I'm too bullish. I don't want to come out looking like a lunatic, but that's okay. So I want people to hear this message on keeping your own keys. And I know that, everyone on this podcast has heard that 1,000 times. And I guarantee you that, 25% of them still haven't made that jump. Self-custody, get control of your Bitcoin keys, because right now you might have $500 sitting on an exchange and it doesn't feel like a big deal. But if we're talking about what's the future of Unchained in 5 years, what's the future of Bitcoin in 5 years, that $500 could be $50,000, and now you're sitting on an extremely large amount of money. And you have to plan for this type of stuff and not be learn about it and understand it before these scary moments hit you in the face, and you're like, oh my God, I have significant exposure to these third parties that I'm trusting too much. Hold your own keys, or learn how to hold your own keys right now, because your hundreds are going to be thousands, and your thousands are going to be 10,000s, and your 10,000s are going to be hundreds of thousands. And but that's the future that we're building towards. We expect that to happen with Bitcoin. If it doesn't happen with Bitcoin, then our company is not going to work out. Most Bitcoin companies aren't going to work out if that doesn't happen. We are building towards that future. So what type of products? Yeah, this buy Bitcoin stuff, maybe that's not a big deal in 5 or 10 years, right? Or 15 years. That's fine. Right now, I'd like to help people obtain Bitcoin as much as I can in the most trust minimized ways that they can. But in the future, I look at it this way. I could draw a chart, with a line down the middle, just a piece of paper, and list out what do people do with money right now, right? What are financial services that exist in the world? And on the other side, I put the attributes of Bitcoin. Like, what are these things that make Bitcoin unique? And then I say, okay, well, what are the things that people do with money right now that Bitcoin negates? Or what business models don't work anymore because of Bitcoin's the way it is? A lot of the rehypothecation stuff, I don't think any of those risk models are going to stand up in a hyper-Bitcoinization world. It makes financial services, I think, more boring, which I think is good. It makes them much more risk adverse, which I think is good. I've been doing, I'm still early in my journey here, and I'd love to, if someone on Twitter can point me in some good directions. Then I've been learning a little bit more about, banking under the gold standard and financial products under the gold standard. And these ideas of buying a house with 10% down or 20% down, that is not a fucking thing in 1920. You were either just buying with the money that you had because you had to buy a house, or maybe you could finance 30% of it or something like that, right? I think the financial products that we end up having are much more risk adverse in the future. And that what does a financial services institution look like? It's providing all the different types of transactions you might want to do, whether that is a lending type transaction, whether that is a savings transaction, whether that is a, maybe we'll be, helping people onboard people onto Lightning, and making sure that there is a portion of their Bitcoin that they don't want in cold storage, that they want to be more readily available and provide those channels and hubs for them to transact out of. I think that basically everyone, my theory on this is that everyone you see as a Bitcoin company right now is going to converge on the same product suite. Some of them might be more focused on on-ramp, off-ramps right now. Some of them might be more focused on storage right now, long-term storage. Some of them are more focused on peer-to-peer spending, and transactions. But ultimately, what a financial services company does is they try to facilitate all of those types of transactions for their customers in the cheapest way possible. And the ones that do that are the most successful ones. So that's what our product suite looks like in the future. We're going to be a financial services company, and as Bitcoin is used in different ways, we will by customers, we will have to react. I personally like starting at the custody point. I think it's the most important problem to solve first, is how is the Bitcoin going to be stored, and doing that in the most trust minimized way. And then you build on top of that. You build the loan products, you build the Lightning connections, you build the on-ramp, off-ramps, and all that stuff. But that's kind of my view on it. And I think we all sort of converge at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's going to be fun to watch. It's so crazy being alive at this point in time where it's still so raw, but you can see, like I wrote about it this week, you can slowly but surely, things are coming together. It's getting easier to use all this stuff, like the Bitcoin wallet tracker software that was released this week.
I heard about that.
Yeah. Makes it easier to connect to your full node. You guys dropping Caravan makes it easier to set up multi-sig. The on and off ramps, for as long as they're needed, they're becoming more bountiful. It's an exciting time.
Dude, how lucky are we?
Very lucky.
How lucky are we to be doing this right now? Like, I think back, .com, time, 98, most of the people that were making moves there had been thinking about this stuff since the early 90s. They waited a decade to get to really commercialize this and build real businesses on the internet. And they've been thinking about this forever. And, I remember I was just a little bit too young. I was in high school, I was young or I was in middle school really, when it first started, 96, and then high school during the big boom in 98, 99. And I felt so crappy 4 years later, I just missed everything. I wasn't a part of that. And we get to do it. We get to do it right now. It's the right time, and the right age, the right time, the right prerequisites to sort of know that you should jump on this early. I feel so incredibly lucky to just be doing this right now. It's so cool.
No, I feel fortunate. Yeah, lucky, fortunate,
grateful,
blessed, grateful. Yeah, all those words. Will, thank you for all you've done for Bitcoin. Thank you for what you guys are doing at Unchained. One product request from this freak down the line. I am interested in inheritance products, making that easier. Some selfish product requests from the podcast.
We got some stuff in store there. We already support it. If you have a revocable trust or something like that, you can set up a vault through that mechanism. It's pretty simple to do that, but maybe there's some more cypherpunky, cool Bitcoin native ways to do that. I don't know. Yeah, we'll take a look. Yeah,
we'll take that as a hint.
Yeah.
Fuck yes.
Matt, do you have any other questions before we wrap up here?
No, this is great. I enjoyed it as always.
Will, I appreciate your time. I cannot wait for the day where I come out to your Wyoming fortress and go fly fishing.
Yeah, man. You can come to the first Wyoming Citadel out here. We'll have some grass raised beef. Go do some fly fishing. It'll be a fun time.
Yeah, I want to see you and Parker do the 900-degree sear.
Oh yeah. Oh, we can outdo that now. 1,100 degrees. Yeah.
1,100. How long does it take to cook that steak? Like a minute and a half, if that.
Yeah. If you sous vide it, it's under 2 minutes. Yeah.
Boss. All right. Where can we find you on Twitter? At W Cole or at Will Cole?
At Will Cole on Twitter.
Yeah.
And just no win Cole cards. It's coming.
Okay. That's something that's most people on Twitter think you have long hair.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's the last professional photo I had taken back in my Stack Overflow days. I don't get a lot of professional photos, but I do have short hair now. So yeah.
Bring back the flow.
Yeah. I was about to with all this quarantine shit, but finally got my barber. Yeah.
Matt grows his flow out during bull markets. He likes to rub it in people's faces that, hey, I don't care. I grow it out.
As is tradition.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Marty.
That's all we got today for you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Peace and love.